Okay. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Christian McNeill, and I am a Three Principles facilitator based in Glasgow. And I'm joined today by Gill. And would you like to introduce yourself, Gill?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Christian. My name's Gill.best. I'm also a Three Principles facilitator. I'm based in Manchester, and as well as being a Three Principles facilitator, I'm a leadership and executive coach. So I'm working with executives and leaders from all sorts of different areas.
Good. And the purpose of this recording is for us to tell you a little bit about a very different way of working with people who are experiencing stress, burnout, overwhelm, anxiety in the workplace. That's something that I have experienced, particularly in my previous role, which was I worked as a lawyer. I was a judge in the tribunal system and a judicial manager, and so I know only too well what that can feel like. But since then, both Gill and I have come into this field, which is sometimes known as Three Principles, sometimes known as Inside Out approach. And it looks at these kind of issues from a very different perspective and seems to provide a lot of relief, change, peace, irrespective of the situation that people find themselves in. And Gill, I'm just wondering if you could maybe say a little bit more about how you work with people and how people experience relief through coming to see that. Coming to get a different perspective on their situation.
Yeah, thanks. I think before I do that, it might be useful to share why this topic is so dear to my heart, where I sort of come from. I've been working in coaching since 2003. And before that, I worked in many different fields. I worked for the US government, for the US Army in Germany. I've worked in higher education. I've worked in private sector as a buyer. I've had an eclectic career. But one of the threads that's run through my career has always been about the people that I've been working with. And what makes them thrive, and what makes me thrive, and that sort of culminated with me doing a master's degree in organizational development, because I realized that so many people were in the wrong jobs, including myself, and if I could do something about that, that would be really, it would help individuals, it would help organizations. And one of the ways I knew that I was in the wrong job was I suffered tremendously from stress. I was a stress monkey. Even when I was doing my master's degree, I would get myself so caught up in what I was doing and would I be able to do it and was I going to meet the deadlines, and it was just a horrible experience. And the same at work. It was, I've got all this work to do, and all I could do was, it just seemed to me the work was overwhelming, and it wasn't, and I just wasn't able to cope with it very well. And so I used to have terrible sleeping problems, and I felt dreadful. I absolutely felt dreadful. And so when I came into coaching, one of the things that we coaches do is we look for solutions to our own problems and help to share them, want to share them with others. Now, coaching, I think, is a brilliant thing because it really helps people to get some time and space to focus on what they want to achieve and maybe what's getting in the way. And over the years, I've seen some people who have benefited tremendously from coaching. And myself, my learning and development was huge, absolutely huge. But I was still at a point where I used to get overwhelmed by stress. And it occurred to me, after I'd been through every tool, technique and strategy in the world and gone on every program and every learning and development thing you could do to manage stress, that wasn't what the answer was. And it's not that coaching wasn't the answer, it's what we were doing and what we were advising and helping people to do through coaching that wasn't always hitting the mark. And I was wondering about that. And I stopped doing everything. I stopped doing all the tools, techniques and strategies because they weren't working for me. It just seemed like damn hard work. And I thought life should not be like this. And this was happening for my clients as well, in all sorts of different areas. And I was curious. And then I came across the 3 principles of understanding, the inside out understanding. And what the major difference was the focus was shifted completely away from changing your experience. So trying to manage your blockages, manage your stress, manage your anxiety, as if it had a life of its own outside yourself. It's as though stress is a thing and we all suffer from it. And there's even, there's a chart that you can rank yourself. How many different activities are you undertaking at the moment and how stressed you will be? So it's as though it's an object. Stress is seen as an inevitable consequence of certain things. And I knew that wasn't true. And the difference that I immediately saw from the inside out understanding was that the focus wasn't on stress as an external thing. The focus was on you are the thinker. We each individually are the thinker and the creator of our experience. And it all happens within us. So it's not the external environment that's causing us stress. It's our internal response to the external environment. We are creating our response to the external environment. And I happened to, in many situations, to have a stress response. Now, when I saw that I was the creator and it wasn't my circumstances that were creating my stress, my anxiety, my overwhelm, that had a huge impact on me. And there's a film called Waiting to Exhale. And it was one of those moments that you think, oh my goodness me, I can stop searching for the solutions to my particular issues. And I immediately saw that was true for everybody. So the implications of understanding that you're the creator of your own reality are that, one, you're no longer a victim of circumstance. And that once you see that the response, the stress response is coming from within you, and that it's temporary, because that was the other thing, it's temporary, it comes and goes, thought comes and goes, and that it has no weight, it's not real, it's what you're thinking in the moment. Once you see that, then your relationship to your experience changes dramatically. And my relationship to my stress changed dramatically. And I saw it for what it was. I saw myself creating that experience. Now and the consequence for me, and I know this, not everyone reacts exactly the same way because we all have our own ways of relating to this. But once I saw it, and once I saw in the moment that I was getting myself, I was creating stress in the moment. For me, it just started to drop away. And once it dropped away, then a level of clarity, or a level of being able to deal with what was in front of me rather than focusing on a stress response, that became available to me. So everything that I was all caught up in just changed shape in my mind. It just changed, looks completely different. I was able to see more solutions. I was actually able to get on and do what I was stressed about rather than worrying about it.
Yeah, that's an
Sorry, go on.
a very good point. And I was also going to say that my experience with this was probably a bit different because it wasn't as instantaneous. What happened for me was, at the time I began to explore this field, I'd had quite a lot of experience of stress. I'd even had a short period of work, and then I came across these ideas, and some aspects that we'll perhaps explore in another call resonated with me very clearly and were very helpful immediately. And I also knew that I was onto something here. There was something important here. But the idea that the entirety of my experience was coming not from the outside, but was being created within, made sort of intellectual sense. I could kind of see that. I could kind of see that not everybody, for example, is stressed out by a burning building. That a fireman might well be thinking, let me at it. Or, an accident, a serious road, a paramedic or a fire crew or whatever might be, very engaged by that, and even I could even see in my own particular job that there was someone doing an almost identical job to me who did it easily, effortlessly, and was one of the happiest men that I'd ever met. So I could see that there was some truth in it, but it didn't immediately help me. And I think it was a bit like, when you're at school and you're learning about physics, that this table that I'm sitting at is made of vibrating particles. Now, I believe that to be true. I understand that. I know that if I looked through an electron microscope, I would probably see that, but it doesn't, but it's a sort of so what, to all intents and purposes, it's still a solid thing. And I realize now that what was happening for me was that the journey from kind of getting it intellectually to the place of being really helped by it happened incrementally in a series of what we describe as insights. And it's, a really embodied sense of seeing it differently. So, for example, quite soon after my first training, I went on a holiday, and I was in the mountains in Italy. And I had a hired car, and I had a rather hairy journey at the end of the holiday back to Milan airport. And I also there was the possibility of snow, and I had snow chains, which I'd never fitted before. I didn't even know if they fitted the car. So I spent the whole holiday fretting. And at the same time, by then I had a sort of head full of, it's only your thinking, it's only your thinking. Which, if anything, made it worse, because I was now criticizing myself. Now, in fact, in the event, the snow was worse than you could imagine. There was about 2 feet fell in the few hours before I had to travel. But I just dealt with it. And we got to the place. And it was only later that I could see that the entirety of my stress during the holiday was created by a future which at that point hadn't existed. There were so I was feeling stress in a given moment, which was being created by my thinking in a given moment, my thinking about a future which didn't exist. And in fact, even though the future was worse than could have been imagined, if you like, when it came to that moment, I wasn't actually stressed. I mean, I was just dealing with it. And in its own strange way, that experience sort of, shows me something now. It shows me just how powerful this this force of thought that's running through us, this capacity for thought that each human being is running all the time. It's incredibly powerful. But as you touched on at the end there, Gill, once you see that that's the only thing that I'm dealing with when I'm feeling stressed, it's the relationship to it changes. I know what I was doing then and previous to that was treating these kind of thoughts as if they were some kind of accurate prediction of what was going to happen in the future, as though they were helping me in some way.
Oh, yeah.
And actually they were doing the opposite. And so for me, that was one of many little insights that began to change my relationship to the constant thoughts that run through me. And sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, whatever. It doesn't matter, but they have become much less relevant to me. Almost in the way that a dream, whatever I dream about, is not relevant. I mean, it might be interesting, it might be funny, it might be frightening, but it's not really relevant to who I am or my capacity to perform in life. And it's this gap between thought and feeling and capacity, or this space that opens up, that we are pointing people to, and almost always, well, certainly always, when people grasp this, when they have a sense of it, when they have an insight around it, they become more resourceful and less stressed. That has been my experience.
Oh, I'm totally mine. And for anyone who's listening to this, I mean, I can imagine this. Yeah, but we've got the work to do. We've got a lot of work to do. You don't realize how much work I have to do. Mm-hmm. And yes, we all have, and some more than others, we still have work to do. That doesn't change. And we, just because we're seeing our relationship to our work differently does not reduce the amount of work that we do. But one thing that tends to happen is we get through it more easily.
Well, of course, because I sometimes use the example, if you imagine an individual's capacity in any moment was like a circle, was represented by a circle. And let's suppose the work that needs to be done, without further analysing, questioning whether it really needs to be done, but the work that needs to be done would take up 75% of that circle. So you've got 1/4 left. If more than 1/4 of your capacity is being used up worrying and stressing, and then you're going to be less efficient and you're not going to get through the work. But if that can collapse, which it often does in a moment or a series of insights, then the capacity exceeds the demands. And that's why, it's in a very logical way, but as well as in a very practical way, people just become more resourceful, resilient, and just better at what they're doing, better at everything.
I've got a wonderful example of that. And it's one that I use quite often because it was so stark. I'd been coaching someone who works for an international charity I've been coaching him for quite a while. We'd had a couple of had a couple of series of coaching sessions, and he was he was gradually getting a lot more clarity about what he wanted to do, etc. But I got one day a phone call from the head office and asking me to go down to London to see this individual because he had so much on his plate. So I went down and I spent 3 hours with him. And when I saw him come in, Christian, to see him, he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was just so overwhelmed. And, what he was doing, he would think, I'm not going to wonder. He was overwhelmed. I would be overwhelmed. He was managing the Ebola crisis at the time for the charity in terms of staffing and making sure everything was run smoothly. And it was in the height of the Ebola. I mean, that's what they do. They're a charity, so they go into crises areas. So if that's not enough, potentially him and his staff were going to fall for Ebola and then what was happening around him as well, he also still had to do his own job, which was a regional job. And he also was having sort of issues at home. And he was away a lot. Plus, he was thinking about his future career and how he was going to manage that. And all this, you could see, he was carrying a big rucksack of this on his back as he walked through the door. And as we spoke, because he is a very resourceful individual, as we spoke, and I'd introduced him to this understanding, so I started pointing him back to where him seeing where his experience was coming from, and that pointing him to the fact that we can have a really resourceful and be really resourceful and have a degree of calm, clarity, and resilience regardless of our circumstances, because that's innate. And we looked at examples where he had actually seen that to be true for him. And he started to see yes, Ebola is a dreadful thing. Nobody would disagree with that. But it wasn't the Ebola that was creating his experience. He started to see that it was his own internal thoughts about Ebola and what that was meaning to him that was creating his experience. And he was able to generalize that to everything that was going on for him. And this happened over a period of 3 hours. And we could just gradually unpicked it. So what's different about that? Why is that not your experience? And you could see him just lighten up. You could see the weight lifting off his shoulders as it dawned on him that it was always coming from him. It was coming from him, nowhere else. And when he broke out into a smile, I said, okay, so now seems like a good time to actually talk about, which is what we do in coaching, what seems common sense to you to do right now. He said, in these various, he said, don't need to do it. He says, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And we left it at that. So I said to him, so okay, so what happens, do you think, when it starts to look as though you're overwhelmed by the situation that you're in? He said, well, right now I see it's just my thoughts on that situation. He says, what I see for myself is I've got a door where they come in, and I've got a door on the other side where they go out. Because the other thing he realized was the temporary and transitory nature of thought. It's thought in the moment. And just because you think it doesn't mean you have to engage it with that thought. That if you leave it alone, it will pass through on its own accord and a new thought will come along.
Yeah. And you touch on a couple of very important general points in that story, because clearly you were introducing him to a different perspective on how human beings operate, how all of us operate. But what was crucial for him was him having insight into it, him seeing it in one area, and then it gradually, that of course the same thing has to be true in other areas as well. And also what you touch on when you turned to look at the substantive problem of, are there decisions to be made here, and him realizing he didn't need to discuss that with you because he was now accessing his own problems. And one of the things that I think is so wonderful about this work is that as people start to have insight, penny drops, have some, they're kind of transformed, it feels wonderful for them. You know, that sense of inspiration and hope is very, very exciting and energizing and hopeful. And the kind of settling down that occurs, the sense of security that develops as people know that actually there is an answer to that and it's in me, and they're not. So we are not creating people who are dependent on, you know, coming to us to solve a problem. You're switching on a whole problem solving apparatus that's already there that people have just kind of
absolutely, and that was I think that's one of the examples that was really shone a light on that. Mm-hmm. That when people have those insights, then a well of resourcefulness and creativity, which we all have and we can all dip into, suddenly becomes clear, and that there is a well there and they can go to it, and it's not something they have to fight for, and it's not something that they have to do a strategy for and work at, and there's none of that. Because we all have it within us, except when we're getting caught up within our thinking, and we know it's just not thinking, the thinking that's in the head, it's the feeling that we have when we get caught up in that. And when we're talking about stress, I mean, the feeling of a stressful thought can be so overwhelming. But when we realize that is not actually giving us any information, and that we don't need to engage in it because it will pass through, then we can dip into the well, and we do naturally dip into the well of creativity, resourcefulness, and resilience, because we can see it and we feel it and we know it's there, as opposed to being sort of covered up with the overwhelm. I'm mixing metaphors like crazy here, but you know, stress isn't a thing. Stress is a thought that we have that we can't stop coming into our minds. But with the nature of thought, the nature of how we create our reality, thoughts come, thoughts go. And where we fall down is we engage with it because it feels so compelling. It feels as though it's teaching us, giving us information. As you said before about the future, a future that we're projecting and we think we can see, and of course we can't. How many people?
Sorry, go on.
No, it's okay. That's okay. Was there something?
No. I was just, you were going to say how many people.
I've lost my throat. But yeah, I think
demonstrating the transient nature of thoughts.
We absolutely. But I think these are, you know, we want to do a series of these conversations about the whole nature of our experience and how it affects us in leadership roles. Because particularly, well, I say particularly, but leadership brings around a whole host of different issues that new leaders can find quite daunting or are unsure about. So,
yes, I think there are both truths, actual facts about the situation, that people are in a new role. They may have very different relationships with colleagues than they're used to. But there's also a whole mythology about how stressful the job is. And
absolutely.
Anything that enables someone to kind of see through that, to see that it doesn't have to be that way, that is not the only way to think about it or see the situation, can be extraordinarily helpful. Yeah. And it occurs to me that anybody watching the video who has any questions that they'd like to raise or have us address or engage with, just drop one of us a line or put a comment under the video, and we'll be very happy to do that in one of our future calls.
Absolutely. So do you want to share your contact details, Christian?
Well, I think we could put them on the page.
Okay.
We are planning to do a leadership training in early in 2018, and the details for that will follow if for anyone who really wants to get sort of stuck in and take a deep dive into this work, and you'd be most welcome. And in the meantime, we're planning a series of calls addressing different aspects that we've come across, both in our own lives and in the clients that we work with, and that we hope will be helpful to anybody viewing these recordings.
Absolutely. And it's great for us too.
Yeah.
You know, the more we look into this direction, the more we see it's a never ending well to draw from. So
yeah, and there's a sort of side effect, I think, of just an enhanced quality of life. I was having a medical treatment, a kind of physio treatment the other day, and the physiotherapist was he was kind of chatting away about what he considered the happiest time of life was, and then he said to me, "What about you? When's your happiest time?" I said, "Well, now." But it's now, because I know what I know now.
Absolutely. I mean, this has been really transformational for me. You know, this was the missing link for me between what I was wanting to do and what the answer was. And so easy. All you have to do is see it.
Yeah. And we're here to help you.
Absolutely. So until next time.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.